Man, what a week. What's going on, sports card hobby family? It's another day. It's another sports card / pop culture. We're having a big picture talk today, friends. Big picture talk. I just got back, had an amazing weekend. Actually got kind of like a date weekend away with my wife and another couple. We went to Baltimore and saw Pearl Jam, our first Pearl Jam concert. And it's funny, we met a guy that was there that it was this 30-second show. And we were like, man, 30 shows. How do you go to 30 shows? Now I understand how you can go to 30 shows. It's just the energy there was absolutely incredible. And then it just so happened, we didn't plan it this way, but the next night, also in Baltimore, was a Bruce Springsteen concert. It was one that had been rescheduled for some reason. And so we had kind of like back-to-back really cool concert nights. We were able to get tickets kind of last second for a good price there to go see Bruce Springsteen. And so again, like how many opportunities you're going to have to go see the boss. And then of course, going to Pearl Jam, that was one that had to cross off the bucket list. But like we were talking about afterwards, we have got to go back and make this a thing. If they're within striking distance, 4 or 5 hours of us, we have got to go. So today we're going to talk about some big picture things going on that I'm seeing. And I think kind of gives me a lot of optimism for a variety of different reasons. And I'm going to explain what that is. Before I get started and dive deep in, big thanks to today's video sponsor, DC Sports 87. You want to sell sports cards on eBay, but selling individual items on eBay, it's a lot of time, listing and shipping and all the stuff that comes with selling on eBay. I send a lot of my cards to DC Sports 87. It's all updated in real time on the website. It's really easy to use. Make sure to check them out. For me, a lot of my hobbying midlife crisis stuff, as we've talked about on the show for years, it's the 80s, 90s nostalgia stuff. I mean, that is really obviously, as you can see in the room, that is really the stuff that gets at me. And I think that one thing that's kind of fun about the collecting journey is you go down all these different rabbit holes and paths, but eventually it feels like you end up coming back to, a lot of times, what brought you in. I know that's not always the case. Maybe you venture off into a cool space and then you start collecting that and it's something that it was never a part of your world and you're in it. But for me, it's always been the 80s, 90s nostalgia, pop culture, and sports cards, sports memorabilia, items. That's the stuff that when I came back into these hobbies in 2018, really drew me in with graded comic books. I looked at cards. I looked at all sorts of different things. And so a lot of my buys here over the last couple of years really has been steering me back in that direction. A couple of buys. Speaking of recent buys, I do have a couple of items I wanted to show you guys. I did finally get the 85 Interlake card. This is the Jordan Interlake card. I really like the story behind this card. It's oversized. It's for Jordan collectors. It's a well-known card because it's just an early Jordan card. The picture on it's fantastic. He's about to make a move. He's got his tongue out. So this is a well-known hobby card. It's got a blank back to it. But this was given out in Chicago. These were handed out for free to kids that were essentially taking part in the program, the Interlake Youth Incentive Program. So they handed these out, and this is not, ultimately, it's not a mega rare card. Although if you look at how many graded copies there are across all the grading companies, there's not a ton. There's really not a ton. I use Gem Rate. They've got that universal pop report dealie. And it kind of shone a light on it. I was like, wow, there's actually not as many of these graded as I thought. But again, just kind of a cool early Michael Jordan card. It is oversized. I know a lot of people don't like the oversized stuff, but a cool piece I've been wanting to add for a while and was able to add it. And then going to the pop culture stuff, an original, going back to the original NES Donkey Kong. This copy is from 1987's complete in-box. So this is not an early print. This is kind of a mid-level print. And that's how, when you're looking at graded games, that's really kind of where value stems from. Is it a first print? Is it a first production? And what's funny is first production might only be 6 months before this one, but it's all marked on the boxes. That's how you're able to tell kind of how early, how was the seal done? Was it hang tab? Was it sticker seal? There's all sorts of things with games that make that kind of interesting. Kind of like first edition books, I suppose, to where there's a focus around kind of those early copies. So the original Donkey Kong, it is a classic game. Of course, I grew up with the NES. And so this was one that I've been wanting to add for a while. And again, just the price points have been pretty high. This is complete in box. So it's box, manual, cartridge, but it's not sealed. The sealed copies of the original Donkey Kong game like this are very, very expensive and not really in my budget at this stage. All right, so I went to go see Beetlejuice 2 last night. I thought it was fantastic. There was a lot of throwbacks, kind of callbacks to the original. They added in a unique story. I've heard kind of mixed reviews. Some of my friends, I think, wanted it to be more just because the original is so good, and that's always kind of the tricky part, is trying to recreate that magic. But man, they had a lot of the main actors came back. Michael Keaton was fantastic. Winona Ryder was really good in it. And then they had, oh man, I'm drawing a blank on her name. It's a young actress that's also in Scream, and then she's also in Wednesday, the main character, Jen something, I can't remember. She was really good in it too. It's kind of like these next generation actors that are kind of filling these roles. And I thought that it was really good, but it was funny. We're watching the previews for Beetlejuice 2, and there's literally like a prequel Lion King movie coming out called like Mufasa. So I guess that's going to be kind of like the Mufasa Scar story that's coming out. Transformers 1, which is kind of, again, I think that's like a prequel origin story for Transformers. And then I'm thinking, okay, I'm watching The Ring of Power on Amazon. That's kind of a Lord of the Rings prequel. They just came out with a Ghostbusters movie. They've got the new kind of crop of Ghostbusters actors that are coming up to take the helm for Ghostbusters. You know, we've had news here recently of Robert Downey Jr. coming back to be Dr. Doom. We just had Wolverine versus Deadpool, where you've got Hugh Jackman, you've got Ryan Reynolds, you've got kind of like the band is coming back together. I think we've got a really fun set of Marvel movies coming here over the next 5 to 7 years. They're going to, bring out kind of some cool stuff, I think. So from an entertainment standpoint, from a pop culture entertainment standpoint, they're going back, we've been talking about it, they've been going back to what's been working here over the last few years, and nostalgia is a powerful drug. I've had people in my comment section that have said that, nostalgia is a powerful drug, because it really is, and it's something that you can't recreate what they did in the 80s and the 90s from a pop culture entertainment standpoint with all the different IP that was created, and this generation has just come right back to it. If you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, if you're in your 30s, maybe it's Pokemon, 40s, 50s, it's sports cards, and it's all these things that you did as a kid or really enjoyed as a kid, or your parents were into, and so you're into it. They're just remaking a lot of stuff. I saw too that they have talked about making a Legend of Zelda movie, which if you look at the success of that Mario Brothers animated movie that came out a couple years ago, it was one of the highest grossing movies, I think, of 2023. If you open up Nintendo and you open up the video game world and you look in all the different stories there, it's kind of endless. When you look at like Marvel and DC, you're like, oh man, look at all the different storylines they can do. Well, think about all the untouched video game story stuff. I mean, there's a lot there. If you go to just the original NES, Metroid's awesome. I mean, Contra's really cool too, with all the special effects, all the alien stuff they could do between Contra and Metroid would be insane. You got Ninja Gaiden. If they do Legend of Zelda, fantastic. You've got all sorts of different things that you can do. There's also a Sonic 3 movie coming out. I love the fact that Jim Carrey plays Dr. Robotnik or whatever the guy is. I love that Jim Carrey plays that part because it's so hilarious and he's still kind of doing his thing. And I feel like he's the perfect actor to play that role. And then it comes down to sports. I think, again, a lot of people hearkening back to, man, I love how basketball was played in the 80s, or man, football used to be this or that or whatever. There's a lot of people, and I think this is an important note too. Of course, I've been talking about it on this channel, but the bread and butter, kind of the foundation of the hobby is not, it's not high-end stuff. It's a lot of the lower to mid-end stuff. And when you look at all the people that get back in and they're buying 80s and 90s cards, whether that's, Barry Bonds, Topps Traded, or it's Bo Jackson stuff, or it's Diamond Kings, stuff that, and these are not expensive cards, even graded, a lot of these cards. You can get PSA 10s of a lot of really cool 80s, 90s cards that, they're just not mega rare, but you can get them for 50, 60, 70 bucks for specific players that you do like. And that's if you get a 10. You can get a 9, you can get an 8, you can get a raw copy, you get a binder set full of them or whatever for less. So, a lot, again, we've talked about a lot of the fanfare is around, it's around the bounties and the breaks and of course the high-end sales and that sort of thing, because it's interesting, sure. But man, when it comes to just average Joe collector, and even as we talk about recessionary times and what's going to happen, everybody's nervous. It's election season. There's like uncertainty. People get kind of antsy. But the one thing though that this hobby does offer is price points for everyone. So even if, mega recession, whatever, depression, people are going to look for something that gives them some joy. And there are trading cards for everyone. It doesn't have to be high end this or high end that, or even mid end. On the low end, you've got all sorts of cool things. And I think that is something that, is going to become more on the forefront as we move over the next couple of years, especially. I just think it's going to be a lot more common, to see people with binders of cards and talking more about 80s and 90s stuff. Again, now I'm not talking about high-end 90s inserts. Yes, of course, that's kind of really cool. The Jordan PMG, really cool, awesome, great. But there's so many layers of cool 90s cards that are not necessarily talked about very much. And so with a lot of folks kind of talking about hobby growth, is it going to pull back? Are people getting in? Are they getting out? And it's probably a combination of all of these things. But I think the one thing that really is important to remember on the singles market, and even if you're buying product to open, it doesn't have to be a $500 hobby box. It can be a $50 box of some 80s whatever set that just is more common. You're still opening packs and you're still having a good time. And so that's the part I think that people might miss. Are people going to get out? Are people going to leave? Depending on how they're operating, it's possible. But to say that there's not trading cards for every single price point, that's just not true. There are options for everybody. So let me know, friends. Nostalgia, it's a powerful drug, and it's driving a lot of what's going on in the collectible space now. How is it affecting you? How are you operating currently in the sports card hobby, or maybe it's pop culture cards or action figures or comic books or whatever it is? How are you doing it? Let me know in the comments. Stay healthy, stay awesome. I'll talk to you again later.